according to reports from Iran, the country's president, Ebrahim Raisi, says he'll respond to any action against their interests. It's after Israel warned that it will respond to Tehran's weekend drone and missile attack. Meanwhile, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is also due to speak to his Israeli counterpart, Benjamin Netanyahu, to urge restraint after Iran's unprecedented missile and drone attack on Israel on Saturday. Earlier, Israel's war cabinet also met for a second time to decide on a way forward. From Tel Aviv, let's bring in our correspondent, Alex Cadier, who joins us now for a sense of the situation on the ground. Alex, it's lovely to see you. Great to also note that you're relatively safe. Let's just begin with the situation in Tel Aviv, given just how unprecedented the past couple of days may have been, even for people who may have not been aware of the tension between Israel and Iran.
I think Tel Aviv has returned to normal, broadly speaking, because Israelis are relatively used to living under the threat of bombardment and of attacks across their country. Tel Aviv is considered to be one of the safer areas, but if I look around me, I can see people moving around the city, going to their workplaces, going perhaps for lunch or just staying out and about as they would be. Now, that was not the case, certainly on Saturday and Sunday, that night where more than 300 drones and missiles were fired across the skies at their country. And had it not been for a coalition of Israeli air defenses, the US, the UK, but also Jordan, as well as the UAE and Saudi Arabia sharing intelligence, the city behind me may have looked very, very different indeed. And now people across the country, particularly those in the northern areas which have been hit by Hezbollah rockets for the last few months, they are all, much like the rest of the world, wondering what will happen next.
And let's speak about that, Alex. I mean, I just referred to reports there around how the president may respond if, in fact, there were to be an escalation of any kind of assault. What are you hearing on the ground around how Israel is likely to proceed, especially because there had been speculation that Israel is kind of secretly preparing for its own assault against Iran?
Well, first of all, I think any response from Israel will not be of the size and scale or the recklessness, frankly, of what Iran did on Saturday night. Certainly, if, as I said, if it hadn't been for those air defenses, the country here would have been very different, including the holy city of Jerusalem, where we know missiles and rocket and drones were shot out of the sky by Israeli air defenses. Now, what we're understanding from US sources is that Israel is considering either very limited strikes against military targets in Iran or not striking back at Iran exactly, specifically, but rather targeting its proxy groups, so Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, or the Houthi rebels in Yemen. All these groups that have been either directly fighting with Israeli troops and firing rockets, particularly in the north of the country, at towns and villages across the north of Israel, or the Houthi rebels in Yemen who have been compromising international shipping in the Red Sea. So that could be one of the options. It's clear that Israel is under a lot of pressure to show enormous restraint in the face of what was that unprecedented attack by Iran. Israeli officials I've been speaking to say very clearly, what would you do if South Africa was attacked at that scale? What would you want your government to do? That is the argument put forward by Israel. Of course, Iran says that this strike came about because of a targeted airstrike by the Israeli Air Force, or certainly alleged to be the Israeli Air Force. They haven't confirmed it. So certainly the situation now, Israel mulling its options, it seems leaning towards a limited response to avoid escalation as asked by its allies.
Yeah, I was about to go there, right? Because we've already seen several remarks from the likes of Joe Biden, who has also called for restraint. It almost seems, at least according to some people, that Israel may find itself slightly isolated if, in fact, it were to retaliate. What's the sense you're getting from your vantage point?
Well, certainly, I think there is a consideration in Israel that there could be a diplomatic avenue. We've heard from Israel Katz, who's the foreign minister here, saying that he is now going for a diplomatic assault against Iran. And Israeli officials for the last couple of days have said that the scale and recklessness, as they described it, of that attack by Iran shows that it is a perpetrator of violence, that the international community should condemn Iran, as we've seen the G7 leaders do, and isolate it further. More sanctions, more diplomatic pressure, less trade, trying to create what they've described as a regional coalition, because it's important to stress countries that were at war with Israel 50 years ago took part in defending the skies over the Middle East on Saturday, particularly Jordan. We know that Saudi Arabia shared intelligence, as did the United Arab Emirates. There is a regional interest here in this not escalating. What Israel wants to do is see that as an opportunity to further isolate and exact a price, as we heard Benny Gantz, the War Cabinet member, say, exact a price from Iran in the weeks to come.
Yeah. I'm interested in the regional dynamics, because part of what our president here in South Africa has said is that this is exactly what they were concerned about, that the ongoing war in Gaza will spill over into the region and bring instability to the Middle East. Part of what you're saying is interesting, because the perception, at the very least, that was created is that Israel might inadvertently isolate itself by continuing with its assault on Gaza and turn, if you like, the other regional powers against it.
Yeah, and we actually heard from the Emir of Qatar just today, who said that actually by having this this fight with Iran, by having this spat with Iran, Israel is distracting from its very, very brutal war in Gaza. And that is something that I'm sure will come back into focus, particularly as we know that the airstrikes are still ongoing in Gaza. We've seen that in the last 24 hours, and the death toll is still increasing. But I think crucially there is a very big difference here with regards to what will motivate Israel's response. October 7th was the largest loss of Jewish life since the Holocaust. It was an atrocity without question. That Israeli response was always going to come, and it was clear from the first day that Israeli officials made it clear it was going to be very, very comprehensive, very brutal. The number of casualties so far, despite more than 300 drones and missiles in Israel, is 0. Nobody was killed by that barrage of missiles, and that allows more political room, at least for the Israeli officials, to withhold and to work with regional partners to further isolate Iran, rather than escalating this into a war between two nuclear-capable countries in the Middle East.